Okay, this is kind of like I feel like I'm doing an emergency meeting with you, and there's one reason why this happened. I've had two back-to-back coaching sessions, and both people did something. One intentionally did it, and the other unintentionally did the almost the exact same thing. And it created a situation in our coaching where I think we did more damage than corrected anything. And it's so sad because I think they're now further behind than they were. And the thing is, I warned them about this. This should not have happened. And so partly I kind of blame myself because I thought, well, maybe I didn't get the message across, but I went both times I said, do you remember when I said this? So both of them admitted that they knew that I had warned them of this. I had warned them. This was not a surprise. So what happened? Well, we started the session okay. And on some calls, I have one person. In fact, very often I have one person on the call with me. I'm doing relationship coaching. You can't do marital therapy with one person, right? Marital therapy is about the marriage and you have to have both people there. But you can do relationship coaching, marriage coaching that I do, working with one person. In fact, I have one rule for the people who are coming. Well, I have some other rules, but one big one. And that is if two people are going to be there, they both have to be in agreement that they are moving forward. Not like, maybe we can figure this out, or I'll see how the session goes. My rule is that both people have to be moving forward. I learned this lesson many times over the years as a therapist. When one person would come in and was rip-roaring ready to go and save their marriage, and the other either was not or said they were neutral. And what I determine is more often than not when they were neutral, they weren't really neutral. There was a tug-of-war going on. And what happened? Nothing good. Every time we would get in a situation where somehow the person who wanted to be there wanted me to convince the other person that they should be there too, that they should work on the marriage. Problem is, that person who had been dragged, coerced, forced, convinced, whatever, to be there was dead set to prove that nothing could happen. So what would happen in almost every situation is that the person who was not ready to be there got further convinced, in fact, convinced themselves further that nothing could happen, that there's no way this marriage could be restored, that there's no reason to work on things. And so they walked out the door, not closer together, but further apart. So how did it happen unintentionally yesterday? Well, the couple had decided that they were going to kind of work on things and were trying to get back together, and they made an appointment. And then they began to kind of have too many conversations that were not getting resolved. And then the person was not quite sure if they wanted to be there. And that's unintentional because something had happened in the midst, and I don't think they even called each other up on that. So unintentional. Intentional. Even though I had said, look, here's my rule. You both have to be willing to be there and move forward. I'm not saying you have to be ready to jump back in the marriage, but you have to be ready to move forward and see what can be worked on. You have to have a willingness to work on your relationship, not trying to figure it out. So in the process, what I discovered, even though I had been assured that that was not the case in my second session, in reality, one person had not wanted to be there. One person had agreed to be there to kind of get the other person off their back, to stop all the squabbling, to whatever. Lots of different explanations came out of that. They did not want to be there to work on things. So I knew it pretty quickly in this one. The first one, we kind of drifted along and I was trying to figure out how to get my bearing and how to help them start moving forward. That was the unintentional one. In this intentional case, even though I had been assured that they both wanted to be there, the one who was more or less dragged or convinced to be there started working very hard to convince me and their spouse that absolutely nothing could happen to save the relationship. Nothing could happen. And they set out to prove that over and over with me. So what had happened is before they came to me, there was some discussions about what do we do, and there was kind of this maybe slight détente, right? They had found a place of kind of a maybe a no battle zone there, right? They had kind of had a ceasefire, and that stopped in the middle of our session. Everything came back. So why did that happen? Because there was a hope that by coming into a session, they would somehow have a transformation. They would somehow see the light, that somehow I would convince them to work on things and move forward, and we would have this great cathartic experience that only happens in Hollywood. That doesn't happen in real life. What happens instead is people defend themselves. And the more they defend themselves, the more they convince themselves internally that nothing can happen. And the therapist has to figure out how to work through that. Now, I will tell you what I've heard many times over the years is that when you take someone and drag them into therapy, the therapist often sides with the one who says there's no hope. I've had more people tell me that they went to therapy and they were hoping that there would be some decision by a spouse to work on things, and they left with a commitment to divorce. They left therapy to work on their marriage, having suddenly moved from whatever was going on at a low level to we're working on a divorce. And the therapist would often say, well, as you can see, there's nothing that can happen here, so I guess we need to figure out how to part you in peaceful ways. They didn't go into therapy talking about getting a divorce, but they left, one of them having convinced themselves that that's the only way out, and the therapist joining in on that. So I don't know how more clearly I can say this, but if you're thinking about going to therapy or even coaching, if your spouse is not ready to move forward, do not try to get them there. Don't do that. That's the time where you step back and you work on rebuilding the connection. That's the time when maybe you get your own help. That's what I love about relationship coaching. I can work with one person and coach them on how to move forward. That's a possibility. But if you force your spouse to be there in any way, if they feel any coercion. So if you say, well, they were a bit undecided, so I made an appointment. Nope, same thing. Well, I just felt like maybe they needed one little push. Nope, same thing. Or, well, we've been talking about it and I thought maybe there was a path forward. No, you need your spouse to say, let's go work on this together. Then the therapist will be able to get you moving. The coaching can certainly do that. I've already talked in a whole nother video about what's the problem with coaching or what's the problem with therapy. So you can watch that and decide if that's where you want to go, but at least you'll be forewarned and forearmed. If you want to check out coaching, then that's another option for you. If you want to check out coaching with me, you can go to leebalcom.coach and check out the relationship coaching. But what I want you to know is I will not make an appointment with you and your spouse unless you both are ready to move forward. In fact, in the past, I didn't do it these past two, and I think I probably should have the second time. If I find that is not the case in the middle of a session, I end the session. I'm not going to be a part of dragging it further down. So then at least both people can be upset with me that I canceled their appointment in the midst of it, and they can be upset together at me instead of further apart. I don't like to do that. I take people at their word. If they break that rule, that's the penalty. I close off the session. I say that because I want you to know how dangerous it is to try to force, coerce, convince, anyway, drag a spouse into working on it. There are things you can do. Do those things and wait for them to come back to the relationship, and then you can work on it in stronger ways. If you don't know how to get the steps to get your spouse to that point, start with my system, the Save the Marriage system. You can find that at savethemarriage.com. That's savethemarriage.com. But please, please do not drag them in. This is Lee Balcom wishing you the best as you work to save your marriage in the best ways you can.